I stepped out of the taxi in full uniform, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. 25 years of silence weighed heavier than anything I carried. It was late September, and the Virginia air was thick with damp leaves and memory. I hadn't even reached the porch before the front door cracked open, and my sister Caroline already had her phone out. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just pressed the phone to her ear and narrowed her eyes like I was a stranger. "There's someone at the gate," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "Says her name is Danielle, claims she's family." The iron gate stood between us, cold, black, unforgiving. I stepped closer, waiting for it to buzz open. It didn't. I pressed the intercom button. Static. Then a tone. Then silence. "Caroline?" I said into the speaker. My voice cracked. "It's me." The door creaked open. She stepped outside, all buttoned up in a tailored blazer and cream slacks, every inch the gatekeeper. Her heels clicked against the stone as she descended halfway down the stairs. "You don't get to show up here dressed like that," she said, eyes hard, "not after disappearing for decades." I tightened my grip on the bag. "I just got discharged. I thought maybe I'd see Mom. Or Dad." She scoffed. "You should have thought of them before you vanished." "We moved on, Danielle. You're not in the will. You're not even on the deed." The words hit harder than any mortar shell I'd ever dodged. "This was my house," I said, voice low. I pointed toward the big sycamore tree that scraped against the attic window. "I broke my arm climbing that tree. I bled into the hallway carpet you probably replaced." She didn't blink. "You always made everything about you. You think a uniform gets you some kind of hero's welcome?" That's when the police cruiser rolled up. No sirens, just lights. Two officers stepped out. One older, the other fresh-faced, probably still sleeping with his academy textbooks under his pillow. The older one looked at me, eyes catching on my insignia. "Danielle Ross?" I nodded. "Ma'am, we're aware of your discharge. Cyber Command, right? Lieutenant Colonel?" I stood straight. "Yes, sir. This was my parents' house." The younger cop looked toward Caroline. "This property is registered to Caroline Price and Robert Ross," he said. "We found no record showing you have legal rights or ownership here." I blinked. "Robert Ross? My father?" Caroline's expression didn't change. "He moved in after selling the house we grew up in. This was Grandpa's. I renovated it. Legally." "I don't care about legal," I whispered. "I care that this was home." The older officer sighed. "Unless you have identification linking you to this address, we'll need to ask you to leave the property." I reached for my discharge papers, but I knew they meant nothing now. So I stepped back, and then another step, until I hit the sidewalk. I hadn't cried when they stripped my medals, not when I coded in a field hospital in Bahrain, but I cried standing there, because the place that made me who I was wouldn't even let me through the front gate. My phone buzzed. I wiped my eyes, fingers fumbling. A message from my mother. No name. Just, "You should return to base. There's nothing here for you." I let the phone slide from my hand, and through the blur, I saw a figure in the living room window. My father. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't look at me. I slept in my car that night, engine off, parked across the street. By morning, a "for sale" sign had been hammered into the front lawn. My body ached, but my eyes refused to close. Every creak of the wind, every flicker of porch light. I stayed locked on the silhouette of a home that used to be mine. The next morning, I dragged myself into a cafe down the road. Bone-tired, still in uniform. Caroline's rejection still stung in my chest like shrapnel. But someone was waiting for me. "Danielle," she said. It was Ruth Carver. Polished suit, dark curls, and the kind of calm confidence I hadn't seen since undergrad. We hadn't spoken in years, but she looked at me like no time had passed. She slid a tablet across the table without saying hello. "I saw the listing this morning. It was my house. Posted under a company called Raven Holdings, LLC. 3 months ago," she said, flipping to a printed deed. "This place was sold. Here's the kicker. Your name's on the seller line." I froze. "That's not my signature," I said. I've never signed anything for that house. I figured, she replied, pulling out another document. It was notarized by someone under review for falsifying DMV paperwork. I'll subpoena him. I shook my head, still processing. So they sold their house, and now they're laundering money through mine? Ruth raised an eyebrow. What? 3 months ago, they told me they were consolidating family assets. Caroline made a big deal about preserving the old place. I thought she meant their place, not this one. Ruth exhaled. They probably used Raven Holdings as a shell company. My guess. Your sister's husband is involved. I felt sick. Nick? Ruth nodded. International logistics, right? Yeah. And they're storing something in the basement. She tilted her head. What kind of something? I don't know, but it's cold. The lights in the basement are always on. No permits for commercial use, though. She pulled up a city report on her screen. Energy spike on the property. That's refrigeration. But again, no permits. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. An email. From my mother. Danielle, this isn't betrayal. It's practicality. You were never here. We were. Love. Mom. I felt like I'd been slapped. They're justifying theft, I muttered. Like it's just family math. Ruth looked me dead in the eyes. You want to take this to court? I nodded. Not just for the house. I want to know what they're hiding. Ruth didn't flinch. Then we start with a forensic document analyst. I'll file an injunction to freeze the title. And then she added one last warning. Danielle, people who forge deeds and commit fraud, they don't mind crossing legal lines. Later that night, I was back in my car, 2 blocks down, watching the house, watching the windows. Around 10:45, I saw a man loitering under the street lamp. He didn't look at me, just stood there. Then he left. I thought nothing of it, until I saw the note under my windshield. Flat, unfolded. If you're the real Danielle, meet me at Alley 7, 11 p.m. Come alone. Cliffhanger. I stared at the note under my windshield. If you're the real Danielle, meet me at Alley 7, 11 p.m. Come alone. I checked the time. 10 minutes. I didn't hesitate. The alley curved behind the old bakery, half lit by a flickering street lamp and reeking of wet asphalt and rust. As I stepped into the shadows, I saw him, mid-40s. Weathered face. Baseball cap low over his eyes. He looked like someone who once knew war and never quite came home from it. You Danielle Ross? He asked, his voice low and urgent. Depends who's asking. Name's Ethan. I live 2 doors down from the house. I served. Marine Corps, 99 to 06. I know your sister's story, but I also know what I've seen, and it ain't right. He leaned against the chain-link fence that separated the alley from the back of the property. Just beyond it, I could make out the warehouse, Grandpa's old garage, long since converted into a storage unit by Nick, my sister's husband. They say you're dangerous, Ethan said quietly. Said you lost it overseas, that you're unstable. I didn't respond. But you want to know what dangerous looks like? He pointed past the fence. Try 4 black vans rolling in at midnight. License plates vanish before they park. Men wear gloves. No talking. No light. Always unloading. Never staying long. You saw Nick with them? Every time, I exhaled. It matched everything Ruth had guessed. What are they unloading? I asked. He shook his head. Crates. Markings scratched off. Sometimes it's chemicals. One time the box slipped and I saw plastic vials inside, stacked in foam. Refrigerated. Something about the way he said it. It wasn't drugs. It was something quieter. More expensive. More planned. You still got your military creds? He asked. I nodded. Then use them. Get inside. But be careful. You're not just dealing with family greed here. He stepped back into the shadows and disappeared down the alley. At midnight, I returned, alone, dressed in black. A camera was clipped to my collar, recorder running, heart pounding. I crouched behind the burned-out fence near the back lot and waited. Right on schedule, 2 black trucks pulled in. No lights, no sound. 4 men climbed out, 2 armed, 1 carried a clipboard. And then, Nick. Confident. Calm. like he'd done this 100 times. They moved like clockwork, straight to the back door, unloading the crates with mechanical precision. No talking, no mistakes. Then Nick opened the warehouse door. I crept closer, keeping low, avoiding loose gravel. My fingers curled around the recorder in my jacket pocket. I slipped it near a cracked vent and angled it toward the loading area. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear muffled voices. One of them, sharper than the rest, broke through the static. If that officer girl finds out, sever the tie. No warning. My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. Rough, southern, deliberate. My father. I froze, replayed it in my head. That deep Virginia drawl. That phrasing. He wasn't just complicit. He was in charge. I backed away slowly, pulled the recorder, slipped out through the alley, one hand gripping my keys like a weapon. Back in the car, I played the audio again. Most of it was inaudible, except for that line. Clear as day. If that officer girl finds out, sever the tie. My father had once taught me how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to shoot. And now he was planning my erasure. By sunrise, I circled the block again. My recorder was gone. Someone had been there. Someone new. Panic hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just unwelcome anymore. I was being hunted. I drove to a 24-hour diner, heart racing, ordered black coffee, and tried to breathe. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was simple. You're playing with fire. I have your military psych report. Want to see what it says about you? I stared at the screen. They were weaponizing everything. My past, my service, even my medical records. The next day, Ruth arranged a meeting in a downtown parking garage. I told her everything. The audio, the vans, the message. She didn't flinch. We file for a forensic audit, she said, and I'll contact a document analyst about the deed. But Danielle, you're in real danger now. I nodded. I'm not walking away. That night, I sat in my car down the street from the house, watching again. A different man was there this time. Broad-shouldered, bald, same silver watch I'd seen on one of the warehouse guys. He paced the block, then left. I checked the windshield. Nothing. Until I opened the door and felt something slide beneath my boot. Another note. Folded this time. If you want answers, come to 1310 Glade Street. Noon. Don't bring anyone. Ruth begged me not to go. Too dangerous, she said. Could be a trap. But I had to know. I had to see how far this went. The next day, I drove to the address. It was an abandoned commercial building. Shuttered windows, broken sign. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:03, a woman stepped out of the building. Mid-50s, dark coat, thin-framed glasses. She walked straight toward my car. I unlocked the passenger door. You're Danielle? Yes. She pulled out a folder. My name is Maria. I used to work for Raven Holdings' logistics team. I'm a whistleblower now. She opened the folder. Inside, maps, invoices, transfer slips, all signed by Nick, all routed through my grandfather's house. What is this? I asked. Illegal biomedical materials, stolen from a government subcontractor. They're storing it in your basement. The energy spikes match the refrigeration units required for transport. And the permit trail? She shook her head. Fake. My mind reeled. I tried to file a complaint years ago, she continued. Got shut down. But then I heard about you. Thought maybe someone finally had enough power to stop them. I stared at the papers. This wasn't just fraud. It was federal. I looked up, and there it was. A black SUV parked just 1 block away, watching. Maria followed my gaze. They're on edge, she said. You rattled something. That means you're close. I nodded slowly. Close to answers. And even closer to danger. The SUV stayed parked as I left the meeting with Maria. I didn't look back. Didn't run. Didn't flinch. But every step to my car felt like walking with crosshairs on my back. Back in my apartment, I spread the files across the floor. Maps, transfer slips, internal memos. All traced back to Nick's logistics firm and the shell company Ruth flagged weeks ago. Raven Holdings. And then Ruth called. You sitting down? She asked. Why? I just got off a call with a federal contact. We ran Nick's name through a sealed case index. And He was flagged in a 2012 counter-intel probe, logistics consultant for a front company laundering dark contract money, Raven Holdings. My stomach turned. You're telling me this goes back over a decade? Longer, maybe. The case was sealed. Someone high up pulled strings. But his name's there. Clear as day. I dropped into a chair, eyes fixed on the documents. It wasn't just a real estate scam anymore. This was national. I opened Ruth's next file, one she'd had a forensic analyst dig up. 3 separate companies, all Nevada registered, all routing funds through the warehouse's leasing contract. Guess who signed the lease? My father. Land use supervisor. Same slanted signature from every tax form growing up. They were all in on it. Every single one of them. Ruth, I said slowly, they used my clearance. What do you mean? They used my discharge ID and credentials to access federal bidding portals. That's how they got around the filters. Jesus, she whispered. That's a felony on top of fraud, maybe even espionage. I called Isaac. He picked up immediately. I've been watching your thread, he said. What you sent? It's enough to raise flags at the Office of the Inspector General. Then let's raise them. We uploaded everything. The altered deed, the audio, the money trail, the forged contracts. And then, while scrolling through my encrypted backups, I found something else. A document I'd stored years ago. Something I'd almost forgotten I had. The original will. Signed, stamped, dated. My grandfather's handwriting still shaky but proud. And in the corner, a name I recognized. Not the family attorney. A notary. Margaret Lewis. She'd been a friend of my mother's. Hosted dinner parties. Played bridge with the neighbors. I found her address online, called her. She picked up on the second ring. Mrs. Lewis, I said. This is Danielle Ross. I'm calling about the day you notarized my grandfather's will. Silence. Then, I wondered when you'd call. My heart skipped. I notarized that document, she continued. I remember it clear as day. He was adamant about the house. He said it was yours. He made sure we understood. I swallowed hard. Would you be willing to sign an affidavit? I will, she said. But be careful. I've known Carolyn a long time. She doesn't lose quietly. That night, I uploaded the video footage I had from Maria. The meeting, the documents, the recordings from the alley. Kayla sent a reply instantly. This is enough to crack the encryption wall around Raven Holdings. I'm in their database now. Find me something they don't want us to know. 10 minutes later, she messaged again. You need to see this. She sent over an internal Raven Holdings email chain, flagged for deletion. She's connecting the dots. Clean house before the 16th. Lock down all CLA accounts. The Ross girl is persistent. I read it 3 times. They knew I was coming. And they were already trying to cover their tracks. By morning, Ruth and I filed a petition with Fairfax County to freeze all property-related transfers under Danielle Ross's name, including the warehouse address. The clerk barely blinked when she read the documents. Just stamped the form and slid it back. Pending investigation, she said. It wasn't victory, but it was a barrier. We drove straight to the house. No more hiding, no more distance. Caroline's Lexus was in the driveway. Nick's black truck parked beside it like it belonged. Ruth handed me the injunction. You ready? She asked. I rang the bell. Caroline answered, wrapped in a cardigan that probably cost more than my deployment stipend. Her face dropped the moment she saw Ruth. What is this? She asked. You've been served, Ruth said. She handed her the envelope. Caroline's hands trembled. Are you serious? You're doing this to your own family? Nick stepped up behind her, slow and deliberate. You really want to go this route? He asked, his voice low and slick. You don't know who you're fighting. I used to run internal investigations for the Pentagon, I said. I've seen men like you bluff, threaten, and fold. His jaw clenched, just for a second. But I saw it. Fear. Caroline's voice rose. You're not even on the deed. That's what the court will determine, Ruth replied calmly. Nick pointed a finger. This is harassment. You're harassing my family. And fraud is a felony, Ruth said. We turned and walked back to the car. The door slammed behind us like thunder. Ruth looked at me. They'll hit back. I know. You ready? I stared out the windshield at the house I used to call mine. More than ever, that night, the documents were submitted to the federal database. The audio files, the notarized will, the flagged accounts, the metadata trail. Kayla sent over a secure batch file from the Raven Holdings system. Every login, every transfer, every deleted message. They thought they could scrub the past. But I was trained to recover ghosts. At 2:13 a.m., an email came through. Subject: cease and desist. From Raven Holdings Legal Affairs. Thin, polished, threatening. I didn't even open it. Because 6 hours earlier, I'd dropped off a certified envelope at the office of the Inspector General. Inside, a copy of every crime they thought no one would notice. The difference? They had their silence. I had receipts. The letter came in a plain white envelope, neatly sealed, tucked under my apartment door like a passive threat. Cease and desist. The heading read, Raven Holdings Legal Affairs. I didn't even bother reading the rest. Because 12 hours earlier I had mailed something they couldn't silence. My federal report. Over 200 pages, numbered, watermarked, bound with sworn affidavits, financial audits, digital metadata trails, forged signatures, all pointing to one ugly truth. They stole my name, my house, and my clearance, and used all three to commit federal crimes. Later that day, I received a notice. Subject: preliminary review assigned. Office of the Inspector General, Department of Defense. No one at the OIG moves fast, unless they smell something rotten. And Ruth and I? We'd given them an entire landfill. By nightfall, I was back at her office. She laid out fresh paperwork on the conference table, 2 folders labeled with their names, Claire Price and Nicholas Keene. Inside, full financial breakdowns. Claire, the supposed nonprofit coordinator, declared $54K in income last year. Actual bank deposits? Over $370,000. All traced to 3 shell companies. Nick's folder was worse. 3 transfers from Martech Logistics matched exact dates of warehouse shipments. 1 deposit for $92,000 came the day after the forged deed was filed. I rubbed my temples. They moved fast, I muttered. They had a plan. This wasn't an accident. This was a machine. They underestimated you, Ruth said quietly. I nodded. They always have. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail. It was Claire. Her voice sounded different this time. Shaky. Soft. Like someone realizing the game was almost over. Danielle, please, let's meet. Just talk. We're still family. This doesn't have to go further. I ended it before she finished. She had her chance to talk. Back when I stood outside that locked gate. Back when she called the cops on her own sister. Now it was time to let the system speak. The next morning, I stood in front of the U.S. Attorney's office in Arlington, elevator humming as it climbed to the 7th floor. Ruth stood beside me, folder in hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Inside the glass conference room, we met Assistant U.S. Attorney Matthew Cruz. Clean cut, sharp eyes, straight to the point. Ms. Ross, he said, we've reviewed your submission. We believe this justifies a formal criminal inquiry. The words settled in my chest like a gear locking into place. He flipped through the files Ruth prepared. The falsified deed, the altered notary, the warehouse transactions, the emails Kayla intercepted. You're stating, he said slowly, that these individuals used your military discharge credentials to gain access to federal contracts? Yes, I replied. They used my name to pass federal clearances. I have confirmation from a DoD backend system, verified by an intel contact. And the house? It was left to me by my grandfather. I have the original notarized will and a video of him signing it. He looked to Ruth, who handed him the notarized affidavit from Margaret Lewis. He nodded. I'll issue federal subpoenas for Claire Price, Nicholas Keene, and Edward Ross. All 3 will be required to testify at a closed preliminary hearing, 2 weeks from today. I leaned forward. I want my identity protected until then. No leaks, no press, no early disclosures. You'll be marked as a protected whistleblower, he said. But be advised, once formal charges are filed, that anonymity ends. That's fine, I said. By then, I'll be the one speaking. Later that afternoon, Ruth and I parked across the street from Claire's foundation office. A nondescript building with a front desk and plenty of glass. Claire walked in, heels clicking, bright smile on her face for the receptionist. She didn't know what was coming until the U.S. Marshal stepped into the lobby. He didn't raise his voice, just handed her a thick envelope and said calmly, "You are being summoned under federal subpoena for alleged participation in conspiracy and fraud." Claire's smile shattered. She froze, glanced around the lobby like looking for an escape hatch. She turned slowly, scanned the atrium. For a second, I thought she saw me, but she didn't. I was watching from behind mirrored glass. And this time, I wasn't the one being erased. That evening, Ruth and I returned to finalize the paperwork. As we stepped out of the courthouse, a black sedan idled across the street. No plates. Windows tinted. Just close enough for me to notice. Just long enough to make sure I saw it. "They're watching," I said under my breath. "Let them," Ruth answered. But even she looked over her shoulder twice on the way to the garage. At 1 a.m., I got a ping from Kayla. "You up?" I was. She sent a secure file. "This one's loud," she wrote. Inside, a leaked internal message from Raven Holdings. "If Danielle opens her mouth, we don't just lose assets. We lose freedom. Trial dates might shift. Clean house before then." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The case wasn't just open. It was accelerating. The foundation they built on silence? It was cracking. And they knew it. Brian Keene walked out of Raven Holdings headquarters with the stiff posture of a man trying not to collapse. Flashbulbs exploded around him. Reporters shouted questions. His jaw locked tight, bodyguards shuffling him toward a black SUV. The company had just issued a one-sentence press release. "Brian Keene has been placed on indefinite leave pending internal review." Translation: "You're toxic now, don't come back." Across town, Claire sat alone inside a downtown law firm that reeked of mahogany, panic, and polished lies. Ruth heard it from a contact in the zoning office. Apparently, Claire had shown up unannounced, rambling, desperate. "She's going to drag us all down," Claire had hissed, "including our father." The walls were cracking, and they knew it. Back at Ruth's office, I sat in front of a screen, watching the clips flood the news cycle. Brian ducking under cameras. Claire wrapped in a scarf, dodging questions outside court. But the image that hit hardest? A shaky video of my father. Inside the living room of the house they stole from me, standing at the window, screaming into a phone. Then, bam, he slammed his fist down on the coffee table, shattering it into jagged glass. The caption below the video? "Family patriarch loses control amid federal scandal." I exhaled, slowly. Ruth didn't look up. She just kept reviewing bank documents like a machine. "They're unraveling," I said. She nodded. Faster than I thought. My phone buzzed. "Courier delivery." I opened the envelope. Inside, delicate cream stationery, yellowed slightly at the edges. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. "Danielle, I've watched from the sidelines far too long. Your mother and I were close once. I knew about the house. I knew your name was on the will. I also knew they changed it. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. Margaret Lewis." I stared at the letter, fingers tightening. Truth always finds a crack, even through silence. That night, we received confirmation. The hearing date had been moved up. The prosecutor's office wasn't taking chances. Flight risk, evidence tampering, digital destruction. All of it was now a clear and present threat. The next morning, the courtroom echoed with the same energy as deployment briefings. Cold, still, tense. I stood near Ruth at the front row while the judge read out the motion. Based on recent evidence, the court finds cause to freeze the financial assets of Claire Price, Brian Keene, and Edward Ross. Their accounts, everything, were now sealed. Bank accounts, investments, even their cars, frozen in place, under scrutiny. No more hiding behind charity foundations and logistics fronts. Everything they touched was under a microscope now. Outside, the sky was moody and bruised, the courthouse steps slick with morning drizzle. I ignored the media. I always did. But then my phone rang. An old number, one I hadn't seen in years. My mother. Danielle, she said softly. And that was it. My name. Not honey, not sweetheart. Just that. It was the first time she'd said it out loud in a decade? I waited, but there was nothing else. No apology, no excuse, just silence on the line. I didn't hang up. I let her sit in that silence. Let her feel what it was like to be on the other side of absence. Later that day, as we wrapped up paperwork at the courthouse, my father intercepted me. He looked older. His coat was wrinkled, tie crooked, skin pale like the color had drained straight from his bones. Danielle, he said, quiet, almost pleading. I stopped. Mr. Ross, I said. He flinched. Don't do that, he whispered. I'm your father. You lost that title when you signed away everything that tied us together. He stepped forward. We didn't know it would go this far. No, you didn't care. His mouth opened, closed. I was scared, he said. No, I said. You were proud. Couldn't handle that your daughter came back in uniform instead of a wedding dress. He said nothing. You let them erase me, I continued. From the will, from the family photos, from every conversation. I sent you my deployment dates, my medals. You never even wrote back. He stared at the sidewalk. You told me once. That's not something to brag about. It's just a job. 25 years in the military. And that's what you said. His eyes were glassy now. He reached out. Slow, trembling. Like he wanted to hold my hand. But I didn't take it. Behind him, I saw her. My mother. Watching from under the courthouse awning, hands clenched, eyes rimmed red. I don't hate you, I told him. But I can't forgive you. Because I'm not just your daughter now. I'm a federal witness. And justice is coming. Whether you ask for mercy or not. He turned, shoulders slumped, and walked away without a word. I stepped into the rain. My mother joined me, wordless. She looked at me like she wanted to say everything. Instead, she whispered, if I'd made different choices, maybe you wouldn't hurt this much. I didn't answer. I just walked. Because pain doesn't vanish with guilt. It vanishes when the truth has its day. The courtroom was full, not for them. For me. Not to see me fail, but to watch the truth unfold. Reporters lined the benches. Veterans dotted the back rows, some in uniform, others in worn jackets with medals pinned to the lapel. Even a few of my old unit buddies showed up, nodding from across the room like I was still standing a post. I wore my service blues, not for ceremony, for proof. I wasn't what they said I was. I wasn't broken, wasn't unstable. I was whole, and I was finally being heard. The judge called the session to order. Federal criminal trial, day 1. I stepped to the front of the court as a federal witness. Not as the disowned daughter, not as the black sheep. As Danielle Ross, Lieutenant Colonel, retired. Cyber Command. The prosecutor spoke first. Ms. Ross, please describe the fraudulent actions taken against you. I steadied my breath. They forged my signature to transfer the deed of my grandfather's property. They used my military discharge credentials to obtain government contracts through shell companies. They laundered money through those contracts and disguised the transactions under charitable and commercial fronts. And were you aware or consenting to any of this? Never. He clicked the remote. Screens lit up around the room. Exhibits A through F. The altered deed? The forensic breakdown of the signature inconsistency. My clearance ID used on procurement forms. Bank transfers. Surveillance footage of black market logistics flowing through the house. An audio file of my father's voice. If that officer girl finds out, sever the tie. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire sat stiff and ghost white beside her attorney. Nick leaned forward, jaw clenched, whispering rapidly. My father didn't move. He just stared at the floor. The defense scrambled. Nick's attorney objected to the surveillance audio. Ruth countered with a chain of custody declaration signed by Kayla, confirming timestamp integrity and system verification. Claire's lawyer claimed it was a misunderstanding. A familial dispute. I leaned in. A misunderstanding doesn't involve stolen federal access credentials and forged notaries. Then came the hammer. The prosecutor displayed the original video of my grandfather signing the will. His voice rang through the speakers. "This house goes to Danielle. She's the one who never left. Not in spirit." Claire's face cracked. Not just her mascara, her entire mask. The final nail? The Department of Defense procurement log showing Danielle Ross's ID number used on a bid submission tied to Martech Logistics, Brian's company. Brian's name, my credentials, my house, my life. The prosecutor turned to my father. "Mr. Ross, can you explain the $320,000 you transferred to Martech in the same quarter this contract was filed?" Silence. Then he looked up, for the first time all trial, and met my eyes. But I didn't see my father anymore. I saw the man who let them erase me. The prosecutor faced the judge. "Your Honor, this is not a family squabble. This is a calculated conspiracy involving fraud, impersonation, and federal contract abuse." The judge didn't blink. The verdict didn't come that day. But the decision to move forward with criminal sentencing did. Motion to dismiss, denied. Assets, frozen. Gag orders, lifted. Court recessed. I stepped down from the witness stand. Ruth met me at the bottom, folder in hand, expression unreadable. We walked out of the courtroom, ignoring the press again. But something had changed. This time, they weren't chasing scandal. They were following a story that mattered. Veterans in the back row stood when I passed. Not clapping, not loud, just a quiet show of respect. One man, gray beard, prosthetic leg, saluted me. "Colonel," he said simply. I saluted back. "We're not forgotten," I told him. Outside, the sky had cleared. Just a sliver of sunlight cut through the cloud cover and lit up the courthouse steps. A reporter called out, "Danielle, do you hate them now?" I paused, then turned back slightly. "I don't carry hate," I said. "I carry clarity." I walked down the steps, Ruth beside me. Isaac waited near the curb. Kayla sent a thumbs-up emoji through our encrypted thread. They weren't coworkers. They were family now. Weeks passed, and when sentencing finally came, it hit like a clean break. Claire Price, 6 years. Nicholas Keene, 8 years. Edward Ross, 10 years. No parole. There was no celebration in court. Just the sound of truth being recorded into history. The empire they built on silence? Gone. The house? Listed for auction, I didn't even bid, because I didn't need the wood, the roof, or the walls. I had my name, my honor, and that was the only home I ever needed. A month later, I stood inside the Defense Service Library. Granite walls etched with names. I'd passed it 1,000 times, but this time, I was looking for mine. There it was. Lieutenant Colonel Danielle Ross, Cyber Command 2000-2023 Valor Service. Integrity. Not a family portrait, not an inheritance. Something real, something earned. And no one, not even blood, could take that from me. I stood still, mist in my eyes. But I didn't cry. I'd already done that. Now I stood tall. For me. For the version of me they tried to erase. For every soldier who came home expecting love and found silence. They stripped her of her name, her home, and her dignity, believing no one would believe a so-called broken soldier. But in the end, it wasn't revenge that brought them down. It was truth. Verified, documented, echoed under oath. Because justice doesn't always arrive with noise or vengeance. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet strength of someone who refuses to be erased. When injustice meets unwavering courage, the final verdict echoes for a lifetime.